I really don't think Democrats know how to resist anymore. I think they're very confused. They're going back to a playbook from 8 years ago that just isn't working and, frankly, nobody cares about because they have less power, they have less influence, and now they're sitting here in 2025 going back to something that kind of worked 8 years ago. The problem is the rules of the game have changed. Good morning. It's great to be here on a Tuesday on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We're streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. So optics matter in protests, right? They do. It's not just about what you're protesting. It doesn't really matter even if you're right. It matters oftentimes how you protest, who's protesting, and ultimately how you go about a protest. And yesterday, I'm watching these people flail and scream into the sky and act like a bunch of, frankly, lunatics. And I'm thinking to myself, is this really the resistance that you're trying to create right now? Didn't make any sense to me when I saw Missouri Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, who represents a large portion of this audience in Kansas City, standing behind Maxine Waters outside the office of the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on Monday. And this comes after the Trump administration basically told the agency staff to stay away from the office because they are reevaluating many of the major bureaucracies in Washington, D.C. So Democrats decide that they're going to have a little protest and a little rally outside of the offices of the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And that included Kansas City's own Emanuel Cleaver. Now, Cleaver was not the star of the show. They decided to make 86-year-old Maxine Waters the star of the show, which is a mistake to begin with. Not only because, I'm not sure it makes sense to make somebody who's pushing 90, who didn't make sense when she was in her 60s or 70s, as the star of your rally and the star of your protest. I'm pretty confident that's not a good idea. And then Maxine Waters gets on that high horse and gets ranting and raving, and it's like, guys, I don't think this is what you're going for here. I don't think trying to go after Elon Musk with 86-year-old Maxine Waters. When you put those two side by side, Elon Musk, who is putting rockets into space and is arguably the Einstein of the generation, compared to Peanut Brain Maxine, I'm not sure that is really the side-by-side that you want to go for here. But if it's your game plan, please, by all means, give it a shot. Well, then Maxine Waters started talking at the rally. She was standing right in front of Emanuel Cleaver from Kansas City. And it's amazing that Cleaver kept a straight face. I mean, he's getting pretty good at this, I guess.
Wow. Look at this crowd. Elon Musk, where are you? Bring your ass over here so you can see who's here. And
yeah, Maxine wants a piece of that ass, Elon. Get it over here. What are we doing here? 86-year-old Maxine Waters saying, get your ass over here. Oh, my goodness, guys. This is not the play. I promise you, this is not the play.
What we're doing, we're not afraid of you. We know that you are the co-president now of the United States of America. But ladies and gentlemen, I want you to follow very closely what he's doing and how he has done it. First of all, we're here at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What is it? This is so important. Prior to this being organized in the Dodd-Frank reforms, consumers didn't have any place to really file complaints. They didn't have anywhere to go when the biggest banks in America was ripping them off. The student loans were being undermined. They didn't have any place to go. Why does Elon Musk want to get rid of all of this? Because he's a thief. He's a gangster.
Oh, with an
He
A.
brings his billionaire friends along with him because they think that they can take over this country. And Trump has said, you give me enough money, you can have it.
That was Maxine Waters, California Congresswoman. Mark is just shaking his head in there. Was it too early to start playing Maxine Waters audio on the show?
I mean, it's never too early, but it's just so outrageous and wild.
Oh, man. It sure is. I know for some of you, you might have said, hey, I haven't had the coffee yet. You can't play Maxine Waters until at least 6:30 in the morning. Sorry, I just had to do it. I had no choice. First off, Elon Musk did not make this call, so that's the first thing that Maxine Waters has to be corrected on. This was shut down by Russell Vought. That is the guy who is overseeing a lot of Donald Trump's budget plans. That's exactly what he's doing, and that's what he was put in charge of doing, by the way. Now, this is a broader conversation about whether or not government employees are supposed to be part of this made-up protected class, and the answer is no. Do I believe that most government employees show up and try to do a decent job every day? Yeah, I do. I genuinely believe that. But you're not a protected class. Okay, we're $36 trillion in debt. We're running about a $2 trillion annual deficit. And guess what? Everything needs to be under the microscope. Like it or not, that's how this needs to operate right now. And if they are going to throw hysterical fits like my 4-year-old does, soon to be 4-year-old, on a regular basis outside of government agencies that most people couldn't really define, right? I mean, if you were to go out on the streets in Kansas City today and say, hey, can you tell me about the CFPB? The what? The who? What is that? Is that the Chiefs, hopeful first-round draft pick? Is that his nickname? No, it's not. CFPB. You're not familiar with it? Oh, you don't know what it does? The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau? Never heard of it. They act like every one of these agencies are part of some massive, American institution that, God forbid, any of this were to ever go away. What would we possibly do? Now, I don't know what ultimately should happen to this specific bureau. I don't. But I know this much. Analyzing, critiquing, and getting under the hood of every single bureaucracy is the responsible thing to do right now, because that's what the private sector does. That's how your business operates. If you're running a deficit, you say, I've got to look at everything I'm doing in my company and reevaluate and figure out where to get more efficient, where to get better, where to get smarter, where I don't need people, where I need more people. That's what we do every single day as private business individuals. Why would we not expect our government, with our tax dollars, our hard-earned money, to do the exact same thing? Put this into perspective right now. We're sitting here in mid-February, right? Most people paying about 20% taxes to the federal government, give or take, depending on your bracket and whatnot. But let's just average about 20%. That means all the work that you are doing and you have done so far this year is going right into the federal government. Every day you've gone to work is going right to the government. And if you don't think that they should be scrutinized in the way that your business is scrutinized by your bosses, by yourself, if you are the boss, that is common sense. It is absolute common sense. And having these insane rallies outside of these nameless, faceless, bureaucratic buildings with 86-year-old Maxine Waters screaming at Elon Musk is not the optics you want to be going for here right now. Because I promise you, it's not going to work.
Well, I saw that on TV, and I thought my TV had flipped networks over to MeTV, and I was looking at Sanford and Son, where Aunt Esther was always getting Fred Sanford all upset there on the show.
No, that was just old Maxine. That's what it was.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness. So we will have much more on this. I mean, they are moving a mile a minute with this Doge stuff, and we've got a lot more to report on throughout the morning here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Meantime, up in Liberty, there was a raid of a Mexican restaurant. It happened over Super Bowl weekend, so, it got overshadowed by the little football game that happened on Sunday. But now it's back in the spotlight. The who, what, where, when, why. What happened here, and how should this be handled in Kansas City in particular? We'll share that with you up in Liberty next on 95.7 FM. So on Friday in Liberty, we had Homeland Security agents go to El Potro Mexican Cafe in Liberty. And there have been so many iterations of this story that have been lost in the conversation around the Super Bowl. Let's be honest. When news like this happens on a Friday, it gets less attention. It was after we were off the air. And when it's on a Friday of a Super Bowl where your team is trying to pull off something historic, it gets even less attention. But now, after that debacle of a game on Sunday that we're all trying to forget here in Kansas City, this story is going to be back in the spotlight. So there are, frankly, many different descriptions of what exactly happened inside of El Potro Mexican Cafe in Liberty on Friday. And I have some of the reporting from Fox 4 that I will play for you here, but I'll give you what I know right now, which is different from what was in the original Fox 4 report. But what I gathered after talking to various people in law enforcement yesterday about this privately is that basically there was a tip that was given to authorities about workers at this specific location. They showed up at this location, El Potro in Liberty, which I have not been to. I can't speak to the quality of food, the quality of service, or any of that. But I know we have many loyal listeners in Liberty who probably can share that information with us. If this has been speculated at that restaurant, you can't go out there and just say, well, it's a Mexican restaurant, so therefore it's probably got some. No, I mean, we don't do that. And I know that, nobody should do that for any restaurant because you could probably find that regardless of cuisine in a handful of restaurants around the metro potentially. But with that, I gathered that this was something that was given to authorities as a tip. They went, they investigated it, and they ended up arresting 12 different people, including somebody who was involved with accusations against children. We'll leave it at that for now. So I'll share the Fox 4 reporting here, and then we'll discuss it more on KCMO Talk Radio.
It happened around 10 a.m. Friday. Sheriff Aiken says he didn't know the operation was happening until he got a call.
I need to know what the heck's going on in my county. I mean, a federal agency is coming in and they're, conducting an operation. Again, if something happens in my county, I need to be prepared for that.
As soon as I heard, I hurried and made my way here. But unfortunately, when I got here, they already had them in the van, and they took 12 employees.
This video obtained by Fox 4 shows Homeland Security agents in El Potro Mexican Cafe in Liberty.
They come in here, they had guns, and they were they also had their face covered, and they blocked all the doors, and I mean, it just made everybody scared.
Now, as it turns out, somebody from Homeland Security did end up calling dispatch. And dispatch basically, and this is what I gathered talking to multiple people in law enforcement, what happened here is that Homeland Security did call the authorities and said, hey, just so you guys know, there's nothing for you to do, but we're just warning you, not even warning you, we're just informing you out of a courtesy that we're going to be here at this location at this time, and, we may end up arresting some people. And that's ultimately what they did. That did not get up the food chain to Will Aiken, Clay County Sheriff, who's a good guy, a good sheriff. He's been on the show. He's been a part of our Back the Blue tour there in Clay County. So he's doing a good job. But I get why he's a little perturbed, because if his phone starts blowing up, his social media starts blowing up, and as well as I do, there are plenty of people looking to push misinformation around this very subject, and he's left standing there saying, what the heck's going on? What am I supposed to do? I don't know anything about this. So I get it. He's like, hey, as a professional courtesy, can you let me know? It turns out they did call dispatch, but they didn't ultimately call the sheriff himself. Okay, fine. We can, fix that for the next time if there is a next time. But the bigger thing is that there were a dozen people arrested, and one of the individuals arrested had a warrant related to child sex crimes. But the misreporting, and it's not the fault of Fox 4 or anybody else in Kansas City media. I'm just correcting the reporting because we've gotten more information over the last couple of days. They were not brought to El Potro due to the warrant of this one individual related to child sex crimes. They were brought to the location because of a tip that they had received about the location and specifically about the workers in the location. So that's what ended up happening here. Now, all that being said, the broader picture, if you're in Liberty or in Kansas City, by and large, the entire region, is this something that bothers you? Is this something that you do not want happening? Or do you say, no, this is why I voted for Donald Trump. This is exactly what I want to have happen. And there's a lot of people that are going to fall on the latter side of this. And I don't have a lot of sympathy right now. And the overwhelming polling would suggest that most people are not sitting there highly sympathetic right now for those who are not here in a legal manner. Those who do not have some type of paperwork or are working their way through the system to try to become an American citizen. And guess what? If a raid results in one person who has an outstanding warrant related to child sex crimes getting arrested, that's a big success to me. I don't see how that's at all in any way controversial. That is a huge success that we just took an alleged pervert off the streets of Kansas City. And if you got, a dozen people in the mix as well who also happen to be here illegally, well, guess what? This is why the CBS News poll shows that came out on Sunday, Donald Trump with a net positive approval rating, his highest ever, because people are fed up. And this issue, the illegal immigration issue, is one that they are most fed up by. Could there be some pain for small businesses? I suppose. But if you've got allegedly a dozen illegal immigrants working for you, that's not like an oops, I got one who slipped through the cracks. If you've got a dozen, okay, that's not a mistake. That's not an oopsie daisy. That is not what that is by any stretch of the imagination. So especially if you're up there in the Northland, we want to hear from you at 913-408-7957 and keep this going and get you more of the latest on the immigration issue in particular nationwide coming up next. So here's what the Liberty police chief and the police department told Fox 4 yesterday after 12 individuals at El Potro restaurant in Liberty were arrested on Friday morning. The statement from Liberty Police Department to Fox 4 read as follows. On Friday, February 7th, the Liberty Police Department was contacted by a federal agency advising us that they were searching for two fugitives in the area of El Potro restaurant. The agency did not request our assistance, but informed us of their enforcement action as a courtesy in case emergency assistance was needed. The Liberty Police Department did not respond to assist that agency. So basically, and this is what I told you about 10 minutes ago, what I heard is that a call was placed from Homeland Security to dispatch. And they said, listen, we're doing this, just giving you a heads up. Now, whether or not dispatch relayed that message to the right people in law enforcement locally in Clay County, completely separate story. Apparently that didn't happen based on what Will Aiken told Fox 4. He's the Clay County sheriff on Friday. But all in all, you look at this story and you say to yourself, okay, there's a lot of people who are going to say this is what I voted for. And considering there was one person in that restaurant who had a warrant related to child sex crimes, most people are going to sit there and say, great, that's a huge win. I don't know why you would look at that and say that that is not a positive for the Liberty community. To me, it's a no-brainer. 913-408-7957. And local law enforcement is also in a position right now where it's not really their job. It's not their purview, right? This is something the federal government should have been doing for years on end and basically was derelict in its duty for the last several years under the big guy.
Come on, man.
And now, well, daddy's home. Back to business. 913-408-7957. Keith is in Gladstone. He's on KCMO. What's going on, Keith?
Hey, Steve?
Steve, what's up, buddy?
Hey, I voted for Donald Trump so, we could get rid of the illegal aliens. I'm an immigrant myself. My mother was an immigrant. She came to this country, couldn't speak English, had to learn and read and write to take the test. I don't believe people should just come over here illegally like that. I think that's completely wrong. I've worked in law enforcement now for 30 years in this state, and I watched this, happen over and over every year. More and more illegals come in here. It's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. When I told my mother about what was happening, she couldn't believe it because she had worked so hard to become an American citizen. It's a slap in her face and everybody her age that came here and busted their butt to become an American citizen and to be proud of this country. And I'm proud to be an American now. So, yeah, good for you, Homeland Security. Good job. Even if they didn't have a warrant for somebody that was a sex offender, good. They need to go. Come in here legally. Do the process legally. That's all I ask as a legal immigrant.
Steve, let me ask you, as someone who's also in law enforcement, is there anything that you are bothered by in terms of how this was communicated between law enforcement agencies?
Well, yeah, they should have probably contacted Aiken. Yeah, they should have.
Yeah.
He's the head law enforcement in that county. That would have been the proper way. And just like what you said, well, next time we're going to change our protocol, how we're going to do this. That's just courtesy. Do they have to? No. They're the federal agency. But it's a courtesy. It's so we all work together.
Yeah.
That's a proper way to do it.
Yeah. Because ultimately the media is going to come, calling to him, right? They don't even know who to contact at HSI. So it would be good for the chief legal law enforcement officer to be in the know on what's going on.
And back in the mid-'90s, before, when there was INS, there was no problems making a call and coordinating with INS to come in and pick up an illegal. They'd come to court and come in and snag them up there.
Mm-hmm.
But, because of politics, it's completely gotten involved in this and shouldn't have. But, like the Republicans say, it's the Democrats' ploy to get votes, decades from now.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's been a thought for a very long time. Thank you, Steve. And it looks like it's backfired on him in a big way. I mean, the CBS poll over the weekend that dropped had Donald Trump's popularity at an all-time high. And by the way, as we well know, right, Donald Trump grew the Republican Party popularity tremendously with Hispanic voters. And Trump was like dead even with Hispanic voters in this poll that dropped over the weekend from CBS. I mean, he was right there, basically a 50-50 split with Hispanic voters across the country on the job that he's doing so far. So this issue of whether or not to deport illegal immigrants is not like a white versus Hispanic issue or a white versus black issue. It's really cutting across racial lines. It's more about socioeconomic levels than it is about what you look like, what your skin color is. When you move up the socioeconomic ladder, there is more sympathy or empathy, shall we say, for those here illegally. Whereas many, when it comes to working poor and the working class, well, first off, they're the ones who are competing for jobs. They're the ones who are competing for housing with these individuals. So it increases their costs. It increases the competition they have to face for certain jobs. They get hurt the most. Those who are sitting high and mighty in the upper middle class to upper class in this country, they can play the whole, oh, we must be welcoming. Oh, man, in this home, no one is illegal. We believe that nobody should ever be deported. They have their yard signs out and the whole thing. And it's like, well, if you went to El Potro and you ended up making 12 arrests, and one of them had a warrant outstanding for child sex crimes, I don't see where the sympathy should come from here. I suppose maybe the pedophiles union might be a little offended by this, but I'm not really interested in their feedback and their insight anyway. And nobody should be. 913-408-7957 is our studio line and our text line here on KCMO Talk Radio. Now, Fox 4 reporting about this raid at El Potro and Liberty last night that there is no word on whether all 12 people detained on Friday are still in custody or not. So we don't know exactly what has gone on with these 12 individuals, but social media obviously caught wind of this, and it was all over Facebook over the weekend. It was also on the KC Discover page as well, which is kind of like your, what would you call that page? Are either of you guys on that KC Discover Facebook page or no? No? Okay. It's kind of like just gossipy, I guess you would say, kind of like the Kansas City Reddit page. Just someone hears something, they throw it on Facebook, and then everyone else believes it must be a fact and must be true. It's like, that's not how this works, guys. You got to kind of, understand what's going on here and roll with this a little bit. But some people just can't help themselves. Jonathan, Kansas City, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
Hey, Pete. 2 points. First, J.D. Vance talked about this during his 3-hour interview with Joe Rogan. Like, he was at a hedge fund a long time ago when he was, in the finance industry, and there was like a big executive, and he would not mention the company, but I imagine it could be any one of them. And he said the guy was going on about how he didn't like Trump, and he asked him, well, why? Because he's like, well, because then I can't hire illegals for my hotels, and it's going to increase my costs and all that. What I wonder is, this location, 12 employees, that seems like a lot, because I know these restaurants have smaller staffs, especially in the post-COVID where they're trying to save money. Mm-hmm. I wonder, how much staff they have left, and so are they going to have to be hiring people? Are they going to be looking now to hire legal or citizens, and are they going to be raising the wage? I wonder over time, as this gets baked into the economy, are the wages and employment going to improve for legal immigrants and for citizens? Because I know under Trump's first term, employment and wages were outpacing inflation, and unemployment was very low. And I know the last 4 years, they say the employment numbers are good, but then when you look on the bottom line, I'm like, no, but less citizens are working than before
Correct.
COVID. I wonder if it's going to take effect.
Yeah, it's a great question. Here's what's got to happen, though, in conjunction with, any type of deportation of people here illegally. You have to also make it so that able-bodied American males are getting back into the workforce. According to recent data, and we've talked about this over the last couple of years, we have a record number of able-bodied men out of the workforce. Estimates suggest that about 7 million men fall into this category. Able-bodied, 25 to 54, who just are not working and are part of the significant decline in labor force participation. So that has got to turn around, and it's got to turn around dramatically, and it's got to turn around soon. You can't just sit around and be like, well, we're going to kick people out who aren't here legally. And by the way, that should happen. There's been too much illegal immigration over the last 4 years. But then you also have to make sure that whether it's through cutting programs that's allowing people to kind of not go to work, plus just a movement around young men who are having significant struggles right now in America to say, you're loved, you've got talent, you have something to give your community, you have something to give your country, get out there, go to work. I mean, there's got to be, I think, a broader rah-rah movement around that for young men who, frankly, have been dragged down for far too long. That part doesn't happen overnight, but cutting the programs that they may be benefiting from when they're able-bodied. Once again, not people who have some type of issue, but able-bodied, that's got to happen in conjunction. Because if not, you're not going to have the labor, and then the labor costs will skyrocket, and there will be some inflationary pressure on that front. Thanks for reminding us, Bill O'Reilly, of the Super Bowl. We're trying to forget it here on a Tuesday morning. Come on, buddy. You're killing us. I know he's got hundreds of affiliates around the country, but, Bill, we're trying to forget that there was a game That's why I'm trying to hype up the snowstorm tonight to get our. Not that it's much better, but gosh, come on, Bill, help us out here in KC.
Yeah, I've been busy closing out memes on my Facebook wall. Going, yeah, don't want to see that one. Don't want to see that one.
Hard pass. Hard pass. But Mark, I got to give you a hard time. All right. I saw your post on X this morning about Brady and Mahomes.
Oh yeah.
Listen, we all love Patrick Mahomes, but let's be honest. Mahomes has now been blown out in 2 Super Bowls. Brady was never blown out in a single Super Bowl. He's 7-3 in Super Bowls, and his 3 losses are all by single scores.
That's true.
And let's be honest, that 40-22 game on Sunday could have been 40-6.
That's true.
There was a lot of garbage at the end there.
I'm not saying that he's the GOAT, Patrick, that is. I'm just saying he could still win 3 or 4 more.
Oh, he could. Yeah. You're right. But I think that these blowout Super Bowl losses are a black eye on his resume. Now, you can say, well, Brady could have lost a couple of more Super Bowls. That's true. He also could have won all 10 he was in. I mean, he lost each of them by 8 or less points.
Would Brady have won the games that Mahomes lost with the same line? Offensive line.
Good question.
That'd be the one. That's where you play your game there and do all your debating. Down there, it's like, look, put Brady behind the lines that Mahomes had there in those 2 games and those losses, and we'd see what happens.
Here's what I will say, and this is where Mahomes is not yet Brady. Brady, I think, played in multiple Super Bowls where he did not have the best roster. Now, was his offensive line as bad as this Chiefs offensive line? Probably not. But what Patrick failed to do on Sunday was make pre-snap adjustments of any kind and mix anything up. It was like, stick to the playbook, stick to what we had planned, even if I'm getting my butt handed to me, play after play after play. I mean, Brady would call out of plays all the time, and there was none of that happening on Sunday. There was just a great lack of creativity that just surprised me with Andy and Patrick having 2 weeks to prepare for this, knowing full well they had a weak O-line going up against the best D-line in the entire NFL, John.
No, I'm with you. Mahomes is not Brady, period.
Not now.
But this debate, I think, is a whole separate thing, too. I don't know if Mahomes calls play, so I'm blaming Reed or Nagy on that whole situation myself.
That's fine. I can get behind that. I can. But I do think that when we talk about the GOAT, we got to step off of that conversation for a bit.
I'm with you there.
And I don't want to. I mean, I can't stand Tom Brady. Tom Brady stunk in the booth. He's terrible. I mean, Greg Olson is a better broadcaster than Tom Brady. You're literally just paying him for this job because he is Tom Brady, but he's not good at it. I mean, I'm sorry. He stinks.
We agreed at our house that we like Brady better than Romo or Aikman. That doesn't mean he's better than. It's just that we'd rather listen to him.
Well, that is a low bar as well.
It is a low bar.
All right, Jim, we got, Jim, have you seen a play like that before? Yeah, I saw it 2 drives ago, Tony. Take it easy.
Oh, Josh Allen.
Oh my gosh. And then there's Troy Aikman, who's just what a stiff that guy is.
How could anybody like him?
Oh, my gosh. Yes. I loved him as a kid, but, man, he has just become a stiff in his old age. Him and Joe Buck, man. Woo! Loosen up there, fellas. You're not that serious. It's sports. It's okay. Relax. Now, with that being said, let me share with you. I mean, listen, there's a lot of great stuff that is being cut from the budget right now, right? I know it's a constitutional crisis, as I put up my air quotes and I say that, but there's great stuff being cut from the budget. Heck, suddenly we're talking about pennies, right? Who doesn't love talking about pennies when you realize it costs 3.5 cents to make a penny? Why are we doing that? But this may be the best yet from Doge. Funding for a museum exhibit focusing on former COVID czar Dr. Anthony Fauci was scrapped by the Department of Health and Human Services last week, one of more than $180 million worth of contracts that have now been axed. The National Institute of Health had been slated to dole out $168,000 for Fauci's exhibit, which was expected to be completed by the end of July, according to a Friday announcement from DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Could you imagine who in their right mind thought it was a good idea to spend $168,000 on a museum exhibit for freaking Fauci? How many masks did the person who thought that was a good idea have on when they came to that decision? Was that done by like a double masker in the middle of the night? Oh, we got to praise. Where's the Fauci Museum exhibit? Let's get it going. I mean, unless that museum has a pair of handcuffs waiting for the guy somewhere, I'm not interested, okay?
You're pardoned.
Yes. Oh, that's right. I forgot. Thank you, Mark. I'm genuinely curious if you're somebody who is a diehard Bud Light drinker. Did you boycott it, and have you gone back to it? You can just text us or call it 913-408-7957. I ask this because there's a new book out by a guy, Anson Fredericks. He was the president of Anheuser-Busch Sales and Distribution, and he worked for Anheuser-Busch for the better part of a decade. He's a younger guy. He's 40 years old, and he just wrote a book that came out called Last Call for Bud Light. I want to get him on the show to talk about this, given the local ties and obviously the huge national story that was the Bud Light boycott in the wake of the Dylan Mulvaney influencer ad that Bud Light ran, going on 2 years ago now.
Normalize the bulge. We are normalizing the bulge.
Thank you, Mark. Because I needed that reminder at 7:50 in the morning with snow coming and the Chiefs coming off a Super Bowl loss. I needed to normalize the bulge with Dylan Mulvaney. But I guess if I'm talking about the story, I understand why you had to work that into the mix, which is fine. But he did a great interview that I was reading through the other day with this book that he just dropped, How Bud Light Killed DEI. And the story goes on to note how Anheuser-Busch, as we all know, was a Missouri and, heck, an American institution, right? Headquartered in St. Louis since the 1870s, Bud Light, and Bud in particular, was the heartland. It was the pulse of America. It was middle America. Now, I had always been a Coors guy. This dates back to my time in western Oklahoma, which was Coors country, and that just kind of became my preferred American beer of choice. But Bud Light was obviously and remains to some degree an American institution. What happened? Well, the story goes on the note, and the book goes on the note, how basically when the company sold to an overseas operation, they moved everything out of St. Louis. They moved it to New York City. And what happened? Suddenly, the people in charge of the brand did not have any connections or any ties to the consumers of said brand. And they started making mistake after mistake after mistake. They dropped all their country music promotions. They started doing techno stuff, just one small thing they were doing. And it all culminated in the Dylan Mulvaney debacle. And the story goes on to talk about this and note, hey, these are the issues that happened for Anheuser-Busch. And this guy, Anson Frederick, who is, once again, a younger guy. Now, he's Ivy League educated. He's a Yale guy. He went to Harvard for his MBA. But he's from Ohio. He went to high school in Cincinnati. Like J.D. Vance, he's got Midwestern roots, despite the fact that he has an Ivy League background. He understands the pulse of who the Bud Light drinker always was. And he was the guy who was kind of firing off the alarm bells and saying, listen, this is not where our audience is. This is not where our consumer is. Here's the problem. If you hate your consumer, if you inherently don't have people in charge of the brand that have anything in common with the consumer of your brand, at some point you're going to step in it. At some point you're going to make a massive mistake. And now that we sit here in 2025, I don't think Bud Light's recovered. And I don't see any evidence to suggest that they've recovered. Now, they're not the butt of every social media joke anymore. They've kind of just fallen by the wayside. Their market share remains down in a very crowded market that is beer. I mean, between all the different things that are out there right now with different types of local beers, of course, you got breweries popping up in every street corner. They've got more competition, and I don't know if they're ever going to recover. I mean, you tell me, because as John says, it's hard to participate in a boycott that you were already a part of. I'd like to think that I was part of that boycott, but I couldn't really do it because I wasn't really a big Bud Light drinker, except for at a Chiefs game, because that's what they would have. I now go out of my way to not have Bud Light at a Chiefs game. I mean, I will stand by it. Although I will say, I don't know which game it was, but Kate did get one for me at a game this year when she was in charge, and I was like, this is not good. It's not the worst thing in the world, but this is not good. All right? But it was like, it's $20, so what am I going to do? Dump it down the drain? But that was the only mistake I've really made on that front in the last couple of years or so. I've tried to stay firm with it. But you think about a company losing sight of what it's supposed to be about and who it's appealing to. And frankly, this should be a case study that is studied in business schools around the country. It'll never happen because of the controversial issue with Dylan Mulvaney, the trans stuff. It will never happen in higher education. It should, but I'm not predicting that it will. But it's a great case study on how a company loses sight of what its goals are and who its customer ultimately is, and serving and, frankly, super serving that customer, especially at a time when you're getting more competition than ever before. So I want to get this guy, Anson Fredericks, on the show. The book just came out. Obviously, he worked for a long time in the St. Louis area and in Missouri, and I want to just get the perspective from him on what exactly he was seeing firsthand. But I've read multiple articles about the book and everything that's coming out of it, and it's probably not going to get a ton of attention because there are people in media who don't want to talk about it, but it should get a lot of attention because of the issue and the issues that came out of it. And one of my favorite quotes that I saw here that he talked about was the notion that for many people in middle America, they spent the last couple of years keeping their mouths shut when the NFL allowed players to kneel because, well, they love the NFL. They love football. When Disney World got involved in the parental rights issue in Florida, well, there's only one Disney World. And guess what? The kids really want to go. Well, all of a sudden, you do this and you politicize the working class man's beer. Suddenly, it's like, you know what? I can do something about that. If I want to take my kids to Disney World, I don't really have a choice. Disney can wokeify itself, but the kids want to go to Disney World. I'm going to bring them to Disney World if I can. I love the NFL. There's no alternative. There are many alternatives to Bud Light. And the minute they broke that loyalty in a business where there is a ton of competition is the minute that Bud Light realized it made a massive mistake. And that is why the backlash was so fierce against them, because it was the first time that you could really have this conservative backlash against something and feel like you weren't missing out. And that's why it became such a major cultural flashpoint. And now you're seeing it roll out in, Trump executive orders, not with beer, but with this specific issue saying, hey, we're not having boys and girls sports, like it or not. And it's an 80-20 issue in America, let's not forget. It's taken us about 4 years to realize that business doesn't operate as well when everybody is working from home. Now, certain jobs are an exception. You run your own business, you're more in sales where you got to be out on the streets versus being in an office building. There's no doubt that there are certain gigs where you can absolutely balance a work from home approach. But for most, you got to be in the office. Now, we know that President Trump, one of the ways that he is getting people back to the office and one of the ways that he's shrinking the federal workforce is by saying, you got to come to work. We've got empty buildings in Washington, D.C., some here in Kansas City, where people just aren't showing up to the office because, well, they haven't had to for the last several years. And Trump's like, that's not going to fly anymore. You're going to come to work. You're going to work here. And you're going to serve the American people because, let's not forget, that's what you're supposed to do. That's your job. You're not like this protected class of worker. That's not who you are. You have a job. You're paid by the American people. They expect a certain job to be done. So Trump was in the Oval Office yesterday. He was addressing this very issue about work from home. And I want to share with you some of what he had to say because it's the kind of stuff that you hear in the private sector and you hear a lot of leaders say now in the private sector. But someone sitting in the Oval Office says this, and it's like, wow, what? You can't say that.
Dictator.
Yeah. It's like, no. You have bosses all over America who have been coming to this conclusion for the last couple of years. But God forbid we say it for federal workers.
Many of those people, and we talk about reporting to work, right? I happen to be a believer that you have to go to work. I don't think you can work from a home. I don't know. It's like there's a whole big, you can work from home. Nobody's going to work from home. They're going to be going out. They're going to play tennis. They're going to play golf. They're going to do a lot of things. They're not working. It's a rare person that's going to work. You might work 10% of the time, maybe 20%. I don't think you're going to work a lot more than that. And I think they have an obligation to work, and they have an obligation not to have a second job when they're supposed to be working for the federal government. You're going to find that a lot of these people had second jobs instead of working they'll be collecting a federal government check, and they'll be working 2 jobs. And that's big trouble for them.
Big trouble. Common sense, John, is what that is.
Playing pickleball, making a lot of noise, bothering the neighbors.
Oh, our buddy Steve Moore, who worked for Trump during his first term as an economic advisor, he lives in Washington, D.C., and he's talked about that on this show. He has said that there are federal employees who have a private sector job. They have a second job, and the government doesn't know about it. And he also said you go to a golf course on a Thursday afternoon, and it's like all government employees. Now, listen, we're all allowed to cut out once in a while and go play golf. I'm not saying you can't do that, but this is what we realized during COVID. Go back to COVID. One of the most crowded places during COVID was golf courses. You couldn't get a tee time. Partially because it was a way to be outdoors with other people and do something, but also everyone was, air quotes, working from home, meaning, it's 2:30 and I don't have any Zoom calls, and sure, I could do some work, but there's no one checking on me, so I'm going to go squeeze in 9. Maybe I'll play 18, depending on how I'm doing. Well, guess what? If you want to be a productive society, you got to work. You have to work. I feel like I did my Mark Levin there. You got to work. You got to have a job. But that's what you have to do. And Trump is saying we need to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money. And guess what? If you have a job on behalf of the taxpayer, well, the taxpayer is expecting you to work as hard as they are working. They're expecting you, with the government, to work as hard as they do to pay your salary. This is common sense. This is not a dictator. This is not a threat to democracy. This is, no, you do the job that you're being asked to do. And guess what? We're going to make sure you're doing the job that you're being asked to do. Because that's how the private sector works. If you don't do the job you're being asked to do, guess what? You're looking for another one. You're done. It's one of the least controversial things that Donald Trump, frankly, has ever done. And this can apply to government workers here in Kansas City, or just, of course, the behemoth that is the bureaucracy of Washington, D.C. And normal people get this. Normal people see what Trump is doing on this front, and they're like, yeah, whether you're a small business owner, whether you're an employee at a major Fortune 500 company, most people have at this point returned to the office in some capacity, assuming they were in the office prior to COVID, right? And that's been a big boon, I'll admit, for radio. Now, there's a lot of people that are listening to us on the smartphone, their Alexa, their Google Home. They might run their own business from home, and now you've got the radio in the home with the Alexa and the smart speakers and whatnot. But it's been good for us to get people back into the office. I readily admit that, but that's not the point. The more important point is it's good for business. It's good for the economy at large because we know people are more productive when they're going somewhere and actually doing the job.
It's good for customer service, a novel concept in this country right now, too, right?
Great point
nice
as
to have
well.
Somebody there to answer the phone.
Yes, that's as someone who is dealing with the DMV right now, that is welcomed, John. You are right about that.
Thank you for calling the DMV. I may help you.
Yeah, do not. Don't start. Don't get me going on the DMV right now. It's going to be a long week with me and the DMV. Don't start. But you're right about that. I'm glad you brought that up. So Trump's just speaking to the everyman. But if you hear from CNN last night, since the Super Bowl was not punishment enough for me watching television, I decided to turn on CNN for a hot minute last night. And this was further punishment. Shame on me. So now I have to share it with you. Caitlin Collins on CNN.
We are 3 weeks into the second Trump presidency, 3 weeks, And tonight, there are warnings that the U.S. is dangerously close to a constitutional crisis. Now, the first shoe on this dropped when a federal judge today said the White House is defying his order to unfreeze billions of dollars in federal aid, marking the first time that we've had a judge expressly accuse the Trump administration of ignoring a court ruling. And in a separate case today, federal employees here in Washington told a judge that the administration was defying another order by not reinstating workers who had been put on leave. Now, this all has prominent Democrats and many of the nation's top constitutional scholars declaring that the U.S. is on the brink of a reckoning. The Trump Justice Department says the president should have the authority to decide how to run the government and that these judges are overreaching. And some of the president's allies say the judges should not be judging any of the moves to shrink the federal government.
You know, I am old enough to remember when Joe Biden famously said, "The Supreme Court blocked me, but it didn't stop me." Do you remember that when it came to student loan debt? And I don't remember CNN talking about a constitutional crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I may have missed that episode of Caitlin Collins' show. I'm not known to watch it every single night.
No.
But I may have missed that one, John.
The constitutional crisis in this country is that newly legalized citizens know more about the Constitution than those of us born here.
Well, that's a great point as well.
How about that?
That is so true. And now you're dealing with Caitlin Collins going on CNN and claiming that basically there's a constitutional reckoning happening because dangerously close. Good point. We're on the brink.
Walls are closing in.
Yeah, we're back to that, man. We are back to the walls are closing in. And what you're really seeing happen here is unelected, nameless, faceless, appointed judges trying to supersede the duly elected executive of the country. You tell me which side of that is a constitutional crisis. The executive branch, which has certain powers that are given to it, executing on those powers, or opponents using judges to try to slow down a duly elected president. There might be a constitutional crisis or dangerously close to a constitutional crisis. It just might not be the way that CNN insists that it is. 913-408-7957. Chuck in Overland Park, what's going on, my man?
Morning, Pete. 40% of the federal government are private contractors. I wonder what Trump's going to do. They probably won't touch the private side. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know, man. I just know that they're taking this thing, it seems like, one bureaucracy at a time, and they're looking for duplication, and they're saying to themselves, you know what? If this job can be done by somebody else, like what happens in our industry and what happens in many of your industries, we're going to try to be more efficient. But in the government, if you preach or talk about or explore efficiencies, you're now a threat to democracy. When we're $2 trillion, running $2 trillion deficits and $36 trillion in debt. Big rally yesterday you might have missed out on. That's okay. You've got a job. You got to pay the bills and pay the taxes to fund this bloated government. But you had a protest that happened yesterday, and it took place outside of the CFPB headquarters. What is the CFPB? Go do man on the street in Kansas City for 10 people. How many do you think could answer the question? Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There was a rally outside of it because President Trump's administration told all the agency staff to stay away from the office. They believe there is duplicity going on within the agency. They can create what the CFPB does in a more efficient manner. So right now they're analyzing this and they're saying, okay, where is there duplication going on and what can we do to make this more efficient? Well, there's a couple of thousand workers of the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which came to be in the wake of Dodd-Frank, the financial crisis of 2008. And in the wake of this temporary, I don't want to call it a shutdown, but call it a shutdown for the sake of the conversation. Political opponents of President Trump's decided that what they need to do is hold a rally outside of a bureaucracy that nobody could pick out of a lineup and act like this is the most dangerous thing that could possibly happen courtesy of the Trump administration. And it included Emanuel Cleaver here in Kansas City, our congressman for the 5th Congressional District, and it was led by Maxine Waters, 86-year-old. Maxine Waters running the show at the rally and showing off her very, very impressive knowledge of the topic and showing off her incredible smarts. Here she is.
Wow, wow, wow. Look at this crowd. Elon Musk, where are you? Bring your ass over here so you can see
Give me that
who's
ass.
here and what we're doing. We're not afraid of you. We know that you are the co-president now of the United States of America. But ladies and gentlemen, I want you to follow very closely what he's doing and how he has done it. First of all, we're here at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What is it? This is so important. Prior to this being organized in the Dodd-Frank reforms, consumers didn't have any place to really file complaints. They didn't have anywhere to go when the biggest banks in America was ripping them off. The student loans were being undermined. They didn't have any place to go. Why does Elon Musk want to get rid of all of this? Because he's a thief. He's a gangster.
Oh, with an A.
He brings his billionaire friends along with him because they think that they can take over this country. And Trump has said, you give me enough money, you can have it.
Yeah. Now they're just making up weird conspiracy theories is what they're doing. What do we call this? Blue Anon? When Democrats start making up weird conspiracy theories about how this is really happening because Trump has a deal with Elon where they get rid of government agencies and make Donald Trump very rich and make Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, even richer. See, they're outing themselves. They're outing themselves because what they are motivated by is power and money. These people have no discernible skill sets. That's why they end up in government. They make a fortune in government despite having salaries of, nice salaries, but not salaries that are going to make you as rich as they end up being in Washington, D.C. at $175,000 a year. So what they're really doing is they're outing themselves. They're sharing their own motivations and they're applying it to other people when there's no evidence to suggest that's what's motivating them.
I see, because I was curious when she said he's a thief and a gangster, because I thought the goal was if you take money, you keep it for yourself. You see, and Elon's he's not getting any of the money.
No, it's going back to us.
Right.
Or at least it's not being wasted for our future generations.
So I guess he's not a thief.
And that's a gangsta to you.
Yes, sir.
Get that ass in
Yes,
here,
sir.
Elon. Give me that. Show me that ass, Elon.
Wow.
Maxine Waters screaming about Elon Musk's ass was not on my bingo card in 2025, but it should have been because we have expected and should have expected the unexpected over the last 3 weeks or so.
That one goes in the banks for us, our drop bank.
Pete, I thought the CFPB was the College Football Playoff Board. That's well done. Very nice job.
Speaking of thieves.
Yeah, speaking of awful agencies, no one's done a worse job than the College Football Playoff Committee the last few years in some respects. So, they're one and the same. They're two peas in the pot as far as I'm concerned. Put the College Football Playoff Board in there with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is being looked at right now. And Emanuel Cleaver was there front and center, and he brought back the old pastor in him.
One of the greatest joys of my time here in Congress was to work with Maxine Waters, Elizabeth Warren, and Barney Frank to create the CFPB. Now, I'm going to be quick because I want to send a message
quick
to somebody. Elon, take your musty millions and musty Moscow rights to the moon.
Okay.
Because if you don't, we're going to stand up, we're going to speak out, we're going to march, we're going to do anything we need to do to make sure that the people of this country understand that the CFPB is for You get your musty hands off of our money.
Well,
I've got some Richard Pryor albums that sound just like that, dude.
Oh, what is with the musty thing? What is Elon Musk and musty? What's he going for there? I can't figure it out, man.
I thought he said mustard hands, but maybe I'm wrong.
No. He said musty because I'm reading this on Cleaver's X page where he shared the video, and it's subtitled, and it says musty.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why, if he's going for the Musk and musty.
I think they're clever. Yeah.
I that's what I don't get. It doesn't make any sense. Take your musty Moscow rights. I'm taking her to the moon. Elon's like, I'll one-up you. I'm taking on the Mars, okay? Because that's what we're exploring
Couldn't
next.
work in Muscatel, I guess. Got Moscow in there. What else?
Musty Musk Moscow rights to the moon?
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? Take your Moscow rights to the moon? What? Like, are you trying to play off of something?
Obviously, this is a reference to oligarchy.
Yeah, I know.
The
He's
Doge
a dictator.
thing. Doge to the moon.
Oh, my. There's no way that Cleaver's bright enough to put that all together, with all due respect, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Show some RESPICT.
No, I can't. I mean, give me Pastor Funderburk over Pastor Cleaver, okay?
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money.
Let's go. You mean people in this town sat in the pews listening to that for decades? I was very angry. Very angry.